inequality and greed, or equality and sharing freely. The second Zenkai, but what's really at issue here? Is it a question of good and evil, right and wrong, or is there something even more fundamental in play? So is this about our morality, or something about the nature of reality itself? I think in Zen terms, we can talk about inequality as being, I'll say the index of our fantasy of separation. We imagine, we act as if we're separate from each other, as if we come to this world, to each relationship, as if we were fundamentally independent beings. And the result is inequality. Because we don't recognize each other, we don't recognize our continuity, we don't recognize that we are all essentially, with our infinite play of differences, our loving different things, our wanting different things, our individual experiences of our lives, that we are still fundamentally embodied, mortal, vulnerable beings. Diverse within ourselves, wanting different things at different times, feeling the play of influence and forces working its way through us, in our emotions, in our thoughts, in our beliefs. And that this is something we all share within our infinite play of difference. And the last thing we want to do is say that non-separation means we're all the same, we should all think the same, we should all do the same. Not at all. But at this fundamental level, we're all sentient, suffering beings. And that as such, if we recognize this, how could we not have empathy for each other? How could we not want the other to have what we have, or their version of it? Happiness, security, meaningful lives and purpose, access to the resources we need. Why wouldn't we want that for everybody else? And yet, we find ourselves acting, thinking, being obliged to act and think in ways which emphasize our separation. There's a problem inbuilt to the way we think about equality itself. If we think equality is always between entirely separate individual beings, it tends to remain abstract. We're all in theory equal before the law, except we know it doesn't actually work like that. The law will, in its reality, will always favour some of us as against others. For example, we know that it's fine to say we're all equal now, we all have equal entitlement to try and realise a meaningful life. And yet, of course, we're always in this particular context, my context, your context, which comes with its own conditions, its own limitations. One size doesn't fit all. How do we relate a really general idea? And I'm certainly not objecting to the idea of legal equality. I'm certainly not objecting to the idea of equal human rights. Far from it. But on its own, and in the way that we tend to frame it, it's not enough. And in actual fact, as I'll try and explain, there's a problem built into this way of thinking that's a feature, not a bug. It's a problem within the way we think about the system itself, the way we experience it. So how do we practice equality in that sense? How do we practice mutual recognition? Well, go back to Thich Nhat Hanh, the smile at people on the street, just this friendly face, friendly greeting. Yes, but that's not always going to be enough, is it? That's not really going to cut it, depending on the context, obviously. It's a great start. But how does that help us with knowing what to do about Gaza or homelessness or any form of dramatic or even quite minor inequality? How do we frame an appropriate response within that context? So what I want to do is think about this idea of equality and inequality and non-separation and separation, and ask, when did we get this idea that if we're equal, we all have to be separate? And of course, there's no absolute answer to that. But the first place that we can really find that is in the 17th century English philosopher John Locke. And he's writing at a time, huge social change, people losing their land, majority of people beginning to have to find employment, work for a living. They're no longer tied to a location. They're no longer serfs or part of a traditional structure. They've suddenly lost their land. They've been told they're now free, equal. Except in many ways they're not. So, let's try and follow Locke's thinking for a minute. He's writing, trying to think, well, what is it that makes me, me, and you, you? What is it that makes a person? And his answer is in terms of, well, actually, it's what's particular to me. It's what I possess. What do I possess fundamentally? Well, this body. That's mine, clearly. What else do I possess? I possess memories. I possess this experience of the moment. I possess my hopes, my aspirations, my intentions for what I'm going to do now and now and now. And I join all those up. Past, present, future. My past, my present, my future. And in doing so, I become me, this person, with these possessions, this property. And property is a proper philosophical term. We don't need to go into that, but think about it just in the straightforward legal sense. I've got this property, this possession, and that's what makes me me. And the thing that we usually don't notice about having our stuff, Mars bars, cars, the rest of it, is that what makes my stuff mine, legally, and Locke's definitely going down that route, what makes my stuff mine is that it's not yours. I get to choose. I get to choose what I do with my stuff. You don't. You don't have any say at all over it. You're excluded. So to have anything of my own, in this legal sense, and it's absolutely fundamental, it comes from the tradition of Roman law, 2,000 years ago. What's mine is mine because it's not yours, and I can legally try and force that. These days I can call the police. That's my car, that's the phone, that's my not theirs. So possession is the legal principle with my stuff, but also for Locke, possession, memories, intentions, this experience of this moment now, that's my possession, that's my property. And actually to express myself, to be myself, past, present and future, runs parallel, and in actual fact it's the same thing, because my stuff is what I owned in the past, what I'm getting now, what I want in the future. It's through my material possessions that I shape my sense of myself as a separate being. And so right here at the end of the 17th century, we've got Locke gluing together the idea of possession as stuff, and possession as in possessing myself, knowing who I am, being this person. And of course, person is a legal definition as well. I could be held to account for what I did. This is an absolutely fundamentally different way of thinking about what it is to be a person. And Locke comes up with this new word, which will be so familiar to all of us, but he's the one effectively that coins it and popularizes it. My consciousness. We're all familiar with the idea of my consciousness. It's not some general property like the ability to hear or the ability to see something. No, my consciousness is mine. It's me. That's what my consciousness is. He's the first person to say that. It's an earth-shattering shift. There's not just conscience. And when in the Middle Ages you talked about conscience, that was, something which God gave us and you could tell right from wrong, but it's not mine, it's conscience. Now Locke's saying, no, this is me, this consciousness. This actually is me. This is what makes me a person. And how do I know it's me? And what's the principal characteristic of this? It's not you. I am not you. I define myself by what you're not. And that is to make myself separate. That is to make myself fundamentally separate from you in a way that's, well, really quite new in history. And that kind of changes everything. And this is suddenly moving into a world where I am excluded from everything that I don't own. Everything. I walk down the road. That's somebody's house. That's somebody else's house. That's the town hall. I'm allowed in there, and that's not allowed in there in that circumstance. I want something to eat. Maybe once in a blue moon I can go and forage somewhere, but where? No, that's somebody's land. Because I'm excluded from everything, suddenly I need to find the means of subsistence or I'll starve. How does that work? Locke has the answer for that. It's my body. Now, I am absolutely the possessor of my body, the proprietor of my body. I can't dispose of it. But I can sell my labour power. I can sell my time. I can sell my time to you. Who's going to have to sell time? Well, everybody who doesn't have independent means originally doesn't own their own land. But actually, if I've got wealth, I've got money, I can buy your time. I can buy your time too. I can buy your time. I don't have to do anything. Because, for Locke, the product of your time will now be mine. Because I paid you for it. Fine. It's now my possession. Who has to work? Well, who doesn't have money? Who doesn't have, for Locke, land? But it's the same thing. Who doesn't have the means to employ somebody else? And obviously I'm not going to pay you more than I can get away with. So you get this splitting in society immediately between those who have wealth, those who hold land or own businesses or can buy commodities to sell or whatever, and those who are obliged to work. And still today we live by it's got more complicated than that. And we have pensions and we have investments and we all have a share in this and a share in that. But it's still the same basic split between those of us who have to work for the means of subsistence and those who employ others to get more. It's kind of built into the system. And Locke was quite explicit about this. The fact that we're all free to sell our labour, the fact that we're all the same before the law means that those of us who have will get richer and those of us who haven't will pretty much stay poor. And all of us. But what it does mean, because we're separate, because we're excluded from everything, we have to think in terms of competition. We have to think in terms of self. Our behaviours reinforce us. Our feelings reinforce us in this bubble. Zen is quite insistent. We are not separate. Empathy, fellow feeling is our natural response. And yet, we find ourselves in a situation where we are so often obliged to act in an opposite dimension, in an opposite direction. Obviously, to the degree that I have wealth, I can amass my material possessions to complement and expand. I can get new experiences. I can have wonderful memories of the past. I can have plans, schemes, imaginings for the future. If I'm feeding myself hand to mouth, my opportunities are much, much more limited for realising myself as this person, this individual. And yet, we all find ourselves to compete within this system to get to the maximum and offer the minimum. So much research done on all of this, and broadly it all paints in the same direction. The more we do this, the less good outcomes we have for everybody. We get ugly, we get mean, we get unhappy, we get anxious, we get stressed. It doesn't work, and yet we exist within this rolling system. We get ugly. And this is the opposite direction from our recognition of each other, which is always about mutuality, about not being separate, which asks what can we together become? How can we together offer each other care? Mutual care. What do you need? How can I help? How can you help me? And of course, in our, what should we say, non-economic lives, hopefully in our personal lives, family, friends, this is not how we are, this is not how we wish to be. We get to a limited degree because for most of us our time is not our own, or a large chunk of our time is not our own. We get the opportunity to care, to relate to each other in a different way, a way which Zen argues is much closer to the nature of reality, not this fantasy of separation, but this realization, this embodying of non-separation. Our practice on the cushion is a way of offering ourselves this recognition. Nothing to do, nowhere to go, no instrumentality. It's not for anything. It's an offering to self, an offering to me, not in the sense of the person of memory and the person of intention and the person that owns stuff, but just as a sentient embodied being who I hope others will recognise and who I aspire to recognise others, and so to treat them as equals, different but equals, and their difference is as vital as their similarity. Because otherwise I see you as an extension of me, or I think you should behave the same as me, or I think you should think the same as me. So we need both, the difference but not separate, within and beyond this difference. So our Zenkai asks us to aspire to sharing freely. What does sharing freely in this sense mean? And I would argue it's recognition, first and last. Recognition, recognition, recognition. But in the full sense, maybe it starts with a smile, just that. But it's also standing with, being with. And what will that involve? Care in all its infinite dimensions, or solidarity with. Perhaps going out of my way for, perhaps putting myself at risk, putting myself on the line for, according to the situation, according to context. What is standing with in this context? I'm inviting us to together make a space for standing with, in our similarity, in our difference, to share and offer this simple recognition to each other in whatever form it needs to be in this moment and this moment. How do we need to recognise each other and to recognise ourselves as vulnerable, fragile, mortal beings, and joyful beings, and beings of desire and beings of pleasure, the fullness of what it is to be a living being. So how do we recognise each other in that? Well, as I've said, Zazen, our sitting meditation, is our first offering to ourselves, to each other. So let's sit.